Good morning, HVAC team. So today we're going to start in chapter 3, which is about safety. So let's get started on safety. So chapter 3, the objectives are explain how to work safely to avoid accidents, discuss the material that appears on all material safety data sheets, discuss how to safely use hand and power tools, discuss how to practice safety in a shop, describe 4 types of fire extinguishers, demonstrate a safe method of lifting heavy objects, discuss safe welding and cutting practices, discuss electrical safety rules, discuss the safe use of refrigerants, their storage and proper disposal, tell how to safely handle refrigerant cylinders, discuss refrigerant system safety, name 3 major hazards of pressure vessels, discuss how a technician's driving record can affect employability, tell what steps should be followed in case of an accident. So, safety, responsibility, good working habits, carelessness, safety training. All right, so let's get into that. So, it is everybody's responsibility to prevent accidents from happening. The first rule in preventing accidents is practicing good working habits. Most accidents are caused by carelessness and lack of awareness. Most companies require some form of safety training. Some companies have their own safety program. So that's all pretty self-explained. Safety is your responsibility. It's mostly common sense. PPE, or personal protective equipment. Head protection includes hard hats to protect against items being dropped on the head. Eye, ear, and face protection includes goggles, earplugs, side shields, and special welding masks. Respiratory protection is for both air purifying and respirators that provide a source of clean, breathable air. Gloves and back braces are included to protect hands and the back. Always promote correct lifting and lifting of heavy objects. Foot protection includes the use of steel-toed boots and shoes. I have paid my dues. I've worn steel-toe boots every day for 16 years, and so you ain't gonna see me wear boots to class. I'm sorry. I wear tennis shoes every day because I mean, when I go out in the field still, because I still do work, in the field. So when I go on a service call or an install, obviously I got my steel toes on, but not at UEI. Tennis shoes every day because them things is heavy and hot, man, and got a mean case of athlete's feet from all them years of wearing this. So that's just, occupational hazard. But I still wouldn't change nothing though. And like I said, I still boot up and get out there and get dirty, when I need to. So anyway, ladders and scaffolds. Ladders must be maintained in good condition at all times. They should be inspected before each use. Use ladders with non-slip feet to ensure a good footing. Always tie down ladders and secure at the top. Maintain the maximum overload rating. Also, I don't know if they're going to talk about it, the distance. So the distance from the base of the ladder to the building, that's important. Let me just make this a little bit bigger. So one of the things that people often do is they set the base of the ladder really far out. Why is my mouse being so weird? One second. There we go. So oftentimes people set the base of the ladder way back here somewhere. So the thing is damn near horizontal. And I guess that's because they have this fear that if they're standing up here, the ladder's going to tip backwards and they're going to fall. But what's more likely to happen is if the feet of the ladder or the base is way back here, it's more likely for it to slip out from under you. And instead of you tilting back that way, the top of this is just going to slide straight down and you're going to fall and smack the ground that way rather than falling back that way. So it's important that you have the proper distance right here, which is 1/4 of the height of the building. So, if the building is, I don't know, if your ladder is extended 20 feet, then your base should be no more than 5 feet away. Wait, is that a quarter? It should be a quarter of the distance from the building. The distance from the building should be a quarter of the height of the building. Let me go back. All right, some more ladder safety. So when doing electrical work, never use aluminum ladders as they are conductive, meaning they conduct electricity. If the electricity touches the ladder, it will shock you. So always use fiberglass or wood ladders. Fall protection. There are two types of methods to prevent injury at heights: fall prevention and fall arresting equipment. When working at heights over 10 feet, either type of safety is required. A safety belt is securely fastened to an anchored lanyard to limit the distance the worker can move. A safety harness is used as a means of fall arresting, which is also anchored to a lanyard. So fall prevention is when it prevents you from falling. Basically, like the safety belt prevents you from going far enough to fall off of the surface that you're on. And then the harness is the fall arresting equipment, to where if you do fall, it'll stop you. You'll just hang there, and you'll be suspended in the air rather than falling all the way to the ground and possibly dying. Hot and cold, burns and frostbite. So burns to the skin can be prevented by safely using torches and other methods of heat generation. Refrigerants can present the danger of frostbite and must be handled safely. Refrigerant is extremely cold coming out of that cylinder. It's just like propane. I don't know if anyone's ever changed the propane tank, but when you open that valve, that stuff comes out cold, and it wouldn't take very long to frostbite your hand if you're not careful on how you're using it. So glove up and be certain about what you're doing. If oftentimes when someone opens a valve or goes to take their hoses off of a system, and the refrigerant starts to come out, a lot of times people freeze up and just stop. And now that refrigerant is going to continue to come out. And now the hazard is even larger. Not only is it going to be more likely to freeze your hand, but you're losing all this refrigerant. So when you're opening or closing something, go for it. When you're taking that hose off, take it all the way off. Once you get it past the point, and we'll go over it a little deeper into this module, but like on your hoses, there's like a check valve. And once that valve is released and closes, the refrigerant will stop flowing. So you got to hurry up and just finish taking it off or finish putting it on, whichever you're doing. If in doubt, just close it again. If you open something and things don't seem right, or if you wasn't ready, just close it again. Don't just freeze up. So I've seen that happen very often, and it's not a good method. So be safe and be sure about what you're doing before you do it. So harmful substances. Harmful substances include asbestos, dust, refrigerants, adhesives, and solvents. Anytime the risk of asbestos becomes airborne, a HEPA filtering system must be present. Asbestos material must be disposed of properly. All dust can be harmful. Approved respirators should always be used where airborne dust is present. Refrigerants can displace oxygen from the air, causing suffocation, especially in confined areas. Do not expose refrigerants to an open flame, as they can produce phosgene gas, which happens a little bit from time to time when you're brazing, and it's a very horrible smell, and it makes it hard to breathe. Resins, adhesives, and solvents can be used to apply insulation and must be handled carefully. Consult MSDS sheets, or material safety data sheets is what MSDS stands for, for proper handling. Safety data sheets. MSDS sheets are required to be provided and publicly displayed in the work area. The sheets must list the name of the product and manufacturer's name and address. They must list any hazardous ingredients and must rank the level of hazard by a specific number. They must give the properties of the materials, such as the boiling point and specific gravity. Lastly, they must give the flammability limits of any usual fire or explosive hazards. Safety data sheets, physical and chemical properties, stability and reactivity, toxicology information, ecological information, disposal considerations, transport information, regulatory information, and other information that might be necessary. These are all things that you should find or will find on safety data sheets. And it's usually in a big yellow binder somewhere in the work area with big red writing on it. You'll see them in mechanical rooms and engine rooms and workshops, places where hazards are present, and you're dealing with machinery and materials, chemicals, and things that you need to know about so you can be able to protect yourself against what you're up against, what you protect yourself against the possible hazards that are present. So tools. Keep hand tools sharp, clean, and in good working condition. Use only properly grounded power tools and disconnect the tools when not in use. Always use tools for their proper function. That's an important one because when you don't, you damage not only the tool, but the component that you're working on. And then when you do decide to go get the right tool and try to do it, you done already stripped it. So always use the right tools. And you'll learn about me when we do get back to class. I talk about my tools all the time like they my kids, because I mean, that you're only as good as your tools in this trade, so get used to buying tools, learn to love it. It's fun to me. It's like when I go to the swap meet, because I get in my continuing students can tell you, I'm a huge believer in the swap meet, preferably the Alpine Village swap meet in Torrance. That's where I get all my tools from, all my power tools, and or at least that's where I go check first before I go pay, brand new in-store prices at Home Depot. Most of my stuff is from the Alpine Village swap meet, but my power tools at least. And my hand tools, depending on what I see when I'm up there, but usually I get brand new hand tools. But anyway, tools are important. Get used to buying them. When I go to the swap meet or to the to the hardware store, I feel like a kid at a toy store, because as you start to do this stuff and you start making money and you start realizing ways to make your job better or faster so you can make more money, because time is money. The faster you do a job, the more money you make. Because if you make $100 for the same job 5 times, the first time you do it, it took you 8 hours. In the second time, but then the 5th time you do it, you then got good at it, you got good tools, and it took you 1 hour. Well, both days were 8 hour. I mean, both days were $100 days. But the first day you made $100 divided by 8. So what is that? I should be able to do that in my head, but nope. $100 divided by 8, that's $12.50 an hour. But on that 5th day, after you done got good at it and you done got you some better tools and you knocked out that same job in an hour, well, now you're making $100 an hour. So that is why it's so important and why I'm so, willing to buy tools. Because whenever I find a new tool that's going to make my job easier, make a task be able to get completed quicker, I'm all over it. So tools is my thing. So we'll be talking about that all throughout the modules. But so let's move on. So safe work practices. Key issues in work safety are identify dangerous conditions and confined space entry. So the service tech should be aware if the working space poses a threat because of moving equipment, electrical hazard, or any special circumstances such as excessive heat or cold. Confined entry is an area that has been closed off from outside, from any outside source of ventilation and is large enough for working. Special circumstances must be adhered to for providing adequate ventilation. First aid. All technicians are advised to enroll in an improved first aid course that includes prevention, how to treat injuries, and CPR. Electrical safety. Know what causes shock and how to prevent it by following proper safety precautions. Always lock and tag out electrical sources when working on equipment. Make sure other trades do the same when working on the same equipment. Know where disconnects and breakers are located for each each piece of equipment that is being serviced. I wish I had mine with me. I got one in one of my tool bags. I will show it to you guys at some point. But a lockout tag out, all it is just this little, it's just a little mechanism. You got your padlock, which is the lock, and then the tag out thing. It's just a, it's like this plastic little mechanism. You loop it through the hole where where you would put a padlock. You loop that through it. It's like this plastic little assembly. And it has a bunch of holes on it for you to put your padlock. So you put the latch through where you would put your padlock on the equipment, because most equipment has a disconnect. The quick disconnect is where you can disconnect the power from. It's like a lever. So when you turn it off, there's there's this little latch that you can close, that you can lock, so that no one can turn the lever back on. So you put your lockout tag out through that, and then you put your padlock on it. And there's usually a series of holes, so if other trades are working on the same equipment, they can put their padlock on it too. So let's say 4 guys are working on the same thing. You got 4 padlocks on this one lockout tag out. That means when one of the 4 guys is done with their work, they still can't just flip the switch back on and walk away, because 3 other guys are still working on that machinery. And so it's protecting all the other guys, because if one dude finishes and flips the power back on without realizing someone else is still working on it, he could injure that person. So that's how the lockout tagout system works. So a lot of the times you're working by yourself as a service tech, and it doesn't really come up, but it's a good practice to do, because even if you're working alone, let's say you're doing a residential service call, sometimes the homeowner might get nosy or start poking around and see, oh, hey, he left the switch off and flip it on and electrocute you to death. So lockout tagout is definitely a good habit. Better safe than sorry. Shop safety. Keep working areas clean and dry. Safely store tools. Have proper first aid equipment on hand. Know when and how to properly use fire extinguishers. Get the local fire department involved for proper training of workers. Classifications for fire extinguishers are A, B, C, and D. Know which type is used for what type of fire. Always practice proper lifting of heavy equipment. Use lifting devices properly whenever possible. So let's go ahead and zoom in on these fire extinguishers. So these are the different classifications of the fire extinguisher. So a Class A extinguisher is for ordinary combustibles. Then the Class B is for flammable liquids. Class A is for electrical fires. And then Class D is for combustible metals. So these are the different types. Maintain an orderly shop, proper use of fire extinguishers. Okay, we kind of already went over that, but I just wanted to zoom in on that so you can see the different types of extinguishers. Okay, where do we go? There we go. All right, moving on. Welding and cutting, acetylene usage, oxygen usage. So acetylene is highly flammable and must be used safely. Maintain proper pressures when welding and cutting, and know what those pressures are. Prevent oxygen tanks from becoming ruptured. Always use proper regulators and adhere to proper pressures when welding and cutting. So whenever we get a chance to get back in the lab and start touching this stuff, I can cover what these pressures are supposed to be and go over how to actually do some brazing and everything. But just a quick little explanation here is this here is the regulator. This is the pressure regulator. That is going to be connected to your acetylene tank, and there's also going to be one connected to your oxygen tank. So this little hole is where the acetylene tank would sit, and then this larger one is where your oxygen tank would sit. And this entire thing here is your torch kit or your brazing kit. So this is your torch tip. These are the hoses that connect to your regulator, which connects to your tank. So the acetylene comes out of the tank into the regulator and then out through that hose or through this orifice, which will be connected to your hose. And that's how the gas is distributed to the tip of your torch where your flame will be coming out. And there's going to be a combination of oxygen and acetylene at the same time flowing through that torch tip to keep that flame right. And again, we'll go over that in detail when we get a chance to touch this stuff. But another thing to know is you have two gauges on your regulator. So actually, let me back up before we even talk about the gauges. This is something I want to cover now before we get in class and y'all start breaking stuff. So this handle here in the middle is this handle is not how you turn the tanks on and off. This handle regulates the pressure that's being released from the tank into your torch tip or into your hoses. So when you're done, when you're not brazing, when your tank is closed, you want to turn this knob to the left to relieve the pressure off of the diaphragm. Inside of this brass assembly here is a diaphragm. And when you turn the knob on that regulator, it puts pressure on that diaphragm. And the more pressure you put on it, the more gas is released. And then when you turn that knob back to the left, it releases the pressure off the diaphragm and allows less gas to flow out. And if you turn it enough to the left, it won't allow any more gas to flow. When you're not brazing, when you're done, when you're putting your torch away, you want that knob turned to the left. You don't need to turn it to the left so much so that you pull the knob completely out, but you need to turn it to the left enough to relieve all the pressure off of that diaphragm. Because when you're done, you don't want to leave constant pressure on the diaphragm because it'll ruin the integrity of it and eventually it won't close properly. So whenever you're done and you're not using it, turn that thing to the left. But when we are using it, you're going to turn it to the right. And I'll explain to you how far to turn it because you're going to watch your gauges. And so let's get to the gauges. This gauge is telling you how much gas is in the tank itself. This gauge is telling you how much gas is being released from the tank into your hose. And the unit of measure is PSI, for pounds per square inch. So when you open your tank, this needle will move and you'll see, okay, my tank is full. And then this needle won't move if this diaphragm doesn't have pressure on it like it shouldn't yet, then this needle shouldn't move. And then when you start to turn this knob, this needle will start to move a little bit until you get it to the level that you want it to. Because we only want to release enough pressure to your torch to get the job done. You don't need to have that thing cranked all the way up like a flamethrower where you're just brazing some 3/8 inch pipe or something like that. So again, we'll get into the numbers and the different applications later, but I just kind of wanted to start with an explanation of how that regulator works. because when we get to class, a lot of times people just start turning on it thinking that that's the way you open and close the tank, and that's not. The tank has a knob on itself, how you open and close it. That's how we regulate the pressure, and which regulates our flame. So we'll go over that again and again and again when we actually get to class, because I know some people still gonna grab it and just start turning it. That's not what we want to do. All right, moving on. Refrigeration safety. Refrigeration, known classifications, use and disposal of oils, handling cylinders, refrigerant safety. So refrigerants are classified according to flammability and toxicity. Know what type of refrigerant is being used and adhere to the proper safety precautions. Oils are considered hazardous waste and must be disposed of properly. Do not mix oils within a given system. Know which type of oil is suited for each system. Cylinders must only be filled 80% of their volume. They are pressurized vessels and must be handled according to DOT regulations, or Department of Transportation regulations. Never use oxygen or acetylene to pressurize a refrigeration system. An explosion can occur. Always charge refrigerant vapor through the low side of the system. Prevent refrigerants from coming in contact with open flames, because again, the phosgene gas. So let me backtrack to 80%. So it says cylinders must only be filled to 80% of their volume. The reason being is because refrigerants expand and contract based on their temperature. So if you have your cylinder only filled 80% and it's nice and cool, then you're in good shape. But that same 80% of refrigerant in that cylinder, later in the day when the back of the van is like 120 degrees, that refrigerant is going to expand, because when temperature rises, pressure rises. When temperature drops, pressure drops. So temperature goes up, that pressure goes up. You have 20% of the cylinder space still left to compensate for that expansion. Now, let's say you had that cylinder 100% full and it's nice and cool. All right, no issues. But now it's significantly hotter in the day, and that temperature went up, so now that pressure is going to go up, and we don't have any more space to compensate for it. You're going to blow the relief valve on that cylinder, or even worse, possibly explode the cylinder. So you need that extra space to account for expansion. So that's why you don't fill cylinders more than 100%. I mean, more than 80%. You fill it up to 100%, you don't leave yourself any wiggle room. Okay, pressure vessel safety. Pressurized vessels pose an explosion hazard and must be treated carefully. Boilers, hot water tanks, and other pressurized vessels must have proper safety equipment in order to prevent possible explosion. Driving safety. Driving is a part of your job. Good driving is essential to the success of an HVAC technician. Your driving record affects your employer's insurance rate. Speeding and reckless driving can never be tolerated. So if they can't insure you, they're not going to want to hire you. And when they say they can't insure you, that means they won't insure you because you cost too much. Or sometimes there are insurance companies that'll be like, nah, we don't want to cover that guy. So that will affect your employability. DUIs, that'll kill you. As a service tech, you're going to be in a service van. They're going to issue a van full of, thousands of dollars worth of tools, equipment, and materials, and you're going to be responsible for managing all that stuff and get into the jobs, sites on time and safely. So your driving record is the only tangible proof that they have that you're capable of doing that. And if not, you're going to have a very hard time getting hired. There are a lot of small companies that kind of, bend the rules and turn the, blind eye to a lot of things because they just need a guy. But don't bank on that. As a service tech, you want to be as clean as you can when it comes to your driving record. I had a buddy get hired. We were both fresh out of trade school. I was already working at CNL, and then one of my classmates showed up a few months later. I'm like, oh, okay, what's up? He got in, and we was both working, and things were good. And then I don't know, probably 2 months in, if that, got a DUI. They let him go. So yeah, just be careful, man. Protect your driving record, and or be confined to just doing install only, because my license was suspended for a lot of my career, so I did a lot of install. Install is kind of my that's my bread and butter. Like that's my I have a sentimental attachment to that. Like that's where I really learned and got good at this trade before I started getting better at service. So I love install, always will. Commercial install, new construction, that was my thing. But even though I liked it, I wasn't so happy with the fact that I was limited to only being able to do install because my license was suspended. So when things got slow at the companies that I was at, I didn't have the option to go help out help out the service department, or maybe even find a gig at another service company, because I didn't have my license. But if you do have driving record issues, that is an option though. A lot of install companies, they don't care as long as you can get to the job site, because you're not going to be driving their company vehicle. So a lot of them, they not tripping. Like, hey, can you get there? Can you be there at 6? Yep. All right. See you at the job site. So that's how that works. So there's opportunity for everybody. Also, since we're talking about it, a lot of people that have criminal history, install again is your friend. I always recommend to all of my students and colleagues, anybody with challenges with criminal records or with their driving records, be open to install, because again, there's a lot more leniency for installers in that area than there is for people for service techs. Even also people who don't speak the greatest English, again, install. Because if you can get to the job site and if you can do the work and you got tools and you on time and you work hard, that's all they care about usually on these job sites. Service, that's when things get a little bit more professional. You need to be able to communicate effectively. You need to be able to get to and from the jobs in the company vehicle and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, if you have particular challenges, be open to install. There's a lot more leniency and opportunity for people with those kinds of challenges. So yeah, anyway, so do your best to try to keep a clean driving record, because you're more valuable if you have it the full package. If you're eligible to do both and willing to learn both, you'll be a little more valuable. Not that you can't make a great living in just one side or the other, whether it's just service or just install or just commercial or just residential, whatever. I've seen people do well in all different ways. So at the end of the day, it's what you're gonna put into it. So steps to follow in the event of an accident: call 911, first aid, report, cleanup. So if serious injury occurs, call 911 or the local emergency number. First aid should be administered, but only by qualified individuals. All accidents must be reported to the employer, no matter how minor. Clear the area after the accident before resuming work. So in summary, it is your responsibility to always work safely, follow all rules and standards. If you have not been trained on the safe operation of any tool, equipment, or device, do not attempt to use it. Safe working habits can last a lifetime, and that is all. So that was chapter 3. So about safety. Obviously, safety is important. You don't want to get out there and lose a finger or a toe or anything like that. I mean, the whole point is to get your money and make it home. So so be safe. Read your chapter, and the review questions for chapter 3 are already on FlexiQuiz. So go ahead, study, get those questions done, and I will see you on the next one. Have a good one.